everybody, so today I'm going to be doing my April wrap up. I'm sorry this video is going up a little bit late. I do realise that we're now fully into May, but due to when I put up my other videos I thought I'd spread them out a little bit more. But we're still only in the first week, so I'm sure it's fine. So this month I read a total of 8 books and I'm just going to give a quick review and my ratings of each one. I'll start with my least favourites up until my most favourites. As a whole, it was an okay reading month. At the start of April, I was sort of in a bit of a reading slump. I didn't really want to read much, and if I did, they were very short books, as you can tell from this. But thankfully, due to obviously starting my YouTube channel, I'm really back into it now, and I'm definitely in the mood to read a lot more, which is good. Thankfully, the majority of the books that I read were really good. A couple of them not massively impressed by, but on the whole, it was pretty good. So the first book that I read this month was Catherine O'Flynn's What Was Lost. I read this for one of my semesters at university for my creative writing course. I actually got the chance to meet Catherine and she signed my book for me, which is quite sweet. She came in and did sort of an hour and a half talk about writing and the process of this, and then a couple of further novels. This is her first novel. I'm really glad that I had that opportunity through university to actually meet her and have a chat, which was nice. So this book is split into 2 perspectives. The first perspective is from a 10-year-old girl called Kate Meany, who thinks she's a bit of a PI, a bit of a secret detective, and she keeps a notebook. And she hangs around in this shopping centre called Greenoaks, which is a reflection of Maryhill Shopping Centre. The first narrative, by the way, is set in the 1970s and the second is set in modern day. And that narrative follows a couple of people that work in and around Greenoaks Shopping Centre. There's Lisa, who works at a record store, and there's Kurt, who's a security guard, and he notices this video of a small child that went missing 20 years ago, and the story sort of unravels from there. But as a whole, I didn't particularly enjoy the second half of this book. I thought the first half was really good. I always get along with child narration, especially, you know, narration that's quite endearing really. You get these detective notebooks and all these things that she sees as scary, suspicious activity are actually just aspects of normal adult life, and the fact that she's that naive is really interesting to me. I think if you've probably never heard of it, you should give it a go. It is interesting and it's very well written, especially for a first novel, and I would probably give this book 3 stars. Along with this, I also read Storytelling by Paul McDonald, who is my university lecturer. I'm not going to rate this really, as it's not a fiction book or a book that I would particularly be recommending. It's just something that I read in the month. It's got loads and loads of information on creating narrative if you're writing your own stuff. It was really interesting. Like I said, I'm not going to rate it, but it was good. So the next book that I read is actually a collection of short stories, and that's Alice Smith's Other Stories and Other Stories. For the most part, I loved pretty much every single one in this collection. There's a couple that stands out to me. Blank Card is probably my favourite, which is about a woman who receives a bouquet of flowers with a blank card, and the story sort of unravels from there. There's also a story in here called Virtual, which tackles the ideas of anorexia. That's very close to home for me. I really enjoyed that one. And there is probably one of the most famous stories in here, Hanging Girl, about a woman who keeps seeing a small girl hanging from trees and lampposts and things, and finally decides to take her home. That one was really quite disturbing and horrifying and wonderful. I'm really looking forward to reading more of her short story collections. I've got 3 or 4 now, so I can get reading one of those next month. But I give this 4 stars. It was really good. The next book that I read was actually something that I read over the span of, I think, a day and a half. I picked it up on a whim. I really wanted to read it and ended up just flying through it, and that was Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. It's about a character called Celeste, who I believe is 25 or 26, and she is very sexually attracted to 14-year-old boys. She ends up getting a job in high school in America. She starts a love affair with a 14-year-old boy called Jack, and you can probably tell things are not going to go well, and they certainly don't. It's very explicit. I mean, I wouldn't read this unless you're really interested in this sort of thing. I am quite interested. It's in the similar vein of Lolita, I suppose, but sort of in reverse. There are a lot of issues in this which I find really interesting. There is a line towards the end where one of the characters says something like, "Would you call sex with a woman like this sexual abuse?" And I think that really says something about society and how we see the genders, and actually, you know, Celeste is this beautiful, gorgeous, fit, healthy woman, and there is that whole idea of her being a high school teacher and 14-year-old boys, and this fantasy of sleeping with teachers. And if it was the other way around, it's seen as very seedy and dark, a man fancying young girls. But if it's the other way around, if it's this beautiful woman, is it not just a boy's fantasy? It's not abuse whatsoever. I could actually probably make a whole video on that sort of topic if you're interested. I gave this book 4 stars anyway. It's extremely explicit, like I said. It seriously is explicit, but I really enjoyed it. It made me angry in some parts, extremely angry. I mean, Celeste is not a nice character to read from, but it's very interesting to see that life, and I think that Alyssa nailed that idea. Yeah, like I said, I could probably make a whole video on this topic, so if you would like that, if something you'd be interested in, please do let me know. But yeah, 4 stars. The next 2 books I don't actually have on me, unfortunately, because I borrowed one from the library and I borrowed one from my boyfriend. The first is Slade House by David Mitchell, which is a wonderful, gothic, creepy piece of literature that's almost split up into 5 short stories, and it spans from the 1970s until Halloween in 2015, about this house and all these things to do with it, and you just get wrapped into each story. I really enjoyed it. It's the first David Mitchell book that I've read. I think if you're a David Mitchell fan, it's a no-brainer, you just got to pick it up straight away, but if you're not, I really would recommend starting with that. I would give Slade House 4 stars. And the next one is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I have all of them from when they originally came out, but for some reason I cannot find the first one, so I borrowed it from my boyfriend, and it was just magical. Do I need to explain how good Harry Potter is? It's a second time round reading for me. I read the first 3 when I was younger, and it was just brilliant. Like, it was so good. I enjoyed all the magic. I loved all the bits that weren't actually in the film. The idea of Peeves especially. I can remember him from reading as a child. It was just magical, and obviously I gave that 5 stars. I can't fault it at all, really. And finally, the last 2 books that I read were both by Andrew Kaufman, and they were The Tiny Wife and All My Friends Are Superheroes. I bought this and read this in one night, and then immediately purchased this one, which came the next day, and then I read that. I think I'll go over All My Friends Are Superheroes first, because this seems to be the most famous one. This is set in sort of a magical realism world where all these people have superheroes, apart from our main character called Tom, yeah. And he has a girlfriend called the Perfectionist. The whole premise is that on their wedding night, the Perfectionist's ex-boyfriend, Hypno, hypnotises the Perfectionist so she can no longer see Tom. He's still there to everybody else, but to her, he doesn't exist. And eventually she flies away, she's moving back home. And he goes on the flight with her because obviously everybody else can see him, and he has the seat next to her. He has that flight to finally try and get her to see him, and it's just wonderful. There's extracts in here where it just references other superheroes that there are. Yeah, I gave this 5 stars. And secondly, which I enjoyed just as much, was The Tiny Wife. This is about a robber who comes into a bank, and instead of wanting money, he takes one personal possession of all the people in the bank and the people that are working there. And it follows all of those people's lives and how their lives pretty much take a turn for the worse. There's a woman who's been constantly chased by a tiger that was originally a tattoo on her leg. The main character's wife, Stacey, realises each day that she's shrinking little by little, and she's worried that she's going to disappear, so they've got to try and work out what's going to happen. I mean, they're beautiful, both of them. Beautiful covers and beautiful little stories, and I'll be definitely picking up more of Andrew Kaufman's work. I really enjoyed those. So there we are. Thank you so much for watching. Feels nice to finally do one of these April wrap-ups, because obviously I've been reading books all my life and I've never actually been able to share my opinions with people. So it's really exciting. I think I've got through my my first one okay. If you've read any of these books or have any suggestions about other books I should read based on these, please let me know down below. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading. Bye!